It does not seem like things are getting any better for Warner Brothers in relation to their video games. And recently, a report or numerous reports have appeared on various sites about the Multiversus video game basically being a massive failure and costing Warner Brothers another $100 million on top of the 200 million that the Suicide Squad game had cost them earlier this year. Now, we all knew that there had been rumors that Warner Brothers planned on shutting down their gaming division because a lot of their video games have been underperforming or they've just been bombing and just been getting heavily criticized by a lot of people. But the thing is, Multiversus is actually not a bad game. It's actually pretty fun, and it's almost like it's like the closest thing we have to a third party Smash Brothers game because you have various different characters from various different franchises like Looney Tunes, Game of Thrones, DC Universe, Cartoon Network, Scooby Doo, what have you. And it was a game that was really popular about 2 years ago because I believe the, early access and beta version of the game had begun back in the summer of 2022, and at one point, the beta version had, like, 20 million players worldwide. I think the beta had ran from July of 2022 to like June or July of 2023. And then the full game was released a few months ago back in May. And that's something that makes no sense because you have an early access beta version of Multiverses, which has been out for like 2 years before we got the full game. And the thing is, by the time the full game came out, nobody really cared. The interest was lost. And I feel like its appeal had waned since then. And even though Multiverses is a free to play crossover fighting game that's on multiple game systems, um, it's something that should have been released in full at least a year ago because I feel like them dragging out like the development process with the early access and the beta is something that ultimately hurt this game to a point where for the most part it's actually somewhat irrelevant. And the thing is, when it comes to fighting games in relation to 2024, we have games like Tekken 8 and Dragon Ball Z Sparking Zero, which I'm convinced one of those two titles is going to um it's going to win the award for the best fighting game of 2024. But if Multiverses, the full game, had came out back in like say 2022, I'm pretty sure it would have been like the best fighting game of that year because 2022 was such a poor year in relation to video game releases. It was very bare bones, and there was hardly anything that you can remember that was really that popular other than Elden Ring, maybe, and quite possibly God of War Ragnarok. But for the most part, 2022 was kind of a slog of the year in relation to video game releases. But it should be noted that back in 2022, um, I believe Multiverses was it was nominated for best multiplayer game at the Golden Joystick Awards and at the Game Awards of that year. And honestly, it shows you how popular that game once was like 2 years ago. And the fact that the full version had come out 2 years ago, it probably would be something that would still have a lot of appeal to this day. But but yeah, I mean, I feel like this is something that had a lot of potential to be greater than what it was. And obviously, you could just tell by looking at the game itself and the characters included and all that stuff. It was designed to target more of a family friendly type of audience. And and I do feel that like the concept and all that stuff was pretty cool, even though it's kind of like a rip off of Smash Brothers. I feel like the concept was pretty cool. The characters included were pretty cool, and we should have gotten a game like this like since the 2000s or whatever. But I guess getting it now or getting it like within the past few years is better than not getting it at all. And it's very sad to hear that Warner Brothers keeps losing money for the most part because let's be honest, within the past year, what high profile video game that Warner Brothers has made that people actually, still care about and that has did like really, really well in sales because even I think even Mortal Kombat 1, underperformed in terms of sales, and that's something that's kind of sad, especially considering how big and how popular Mortal Kombat 11 was back in 2019. But it goes to show you that things are rough for a lot of developers and a lot of gaming companies all across the board. And it's not just Warner Brothers that's struggling with publishing and releasing popular titles that surpass like 3 billion or what have you. It seems to be a lot of other video game companies, whether it's Square Enix, whether it's Capcom, or what have you. The only the only publisher that I know of that's not really struggling in terms of producing high-profile games is Bandai Namco, and I feel like Bandai Namco has shined more in 2024 than just about any other video game company. But that's just my personal opinion. Um, I believe we had just gotten a season 4 trailer for Multiversus for Raven from Teen Titans and from DC, and honestly, it looks pretty impressive. But honestly, I feel like this is something that's geared more towards kids and more towards the general audience than it is towards adults and all that. And I do feel like that's the right approach because it's really hard to get young adults invested in games like multiverses, especially when there's no blood, profanity, and violence, and or any of that stuff. And a lot of games that young adults are into are heavily story driven. So I think I think multiverses appealing to a general audience makes a lot of sense. But again, I feel like it took way too long for us to get the full version of the game. Obviously, it's something that hurt Warner Brothers way more than it helped them in the long run.